All right, welcome into Yard Prep here on the 5 Reasons YouTube channel. I'm Ethan Skolnick. You can follow me, Ethan J. Skolnick, at 5 Reasons Sports. I got Louis Sung. Follow him at Louis D. Sung on Twitter. We might have Eric Wadicki joining. Louis, I saw he just popped something in the chat, so he might be jumping in here with us as well. We're going to tell you about the sponsor of this episode. Before we do, though, again, what are we talking about? Dolphins Patriots. So the Dolphins going up to New England, 2 worst offenses in the entire NFL. We're going to try to give you a reason to actually watch this thing. One reason to watch it is Prize Picks. Use the code 5 FIVE. All you got to do is put down $5 and play it, and they will give you $50 more to play. That's it. It's real uncomplicated like that. You can play anywhere from 2 to 4 players across the sports spectrum. Again, at prizepicks.com, use the code 5. It is legal in the state of Florida, and they're giving you a 10-to-1 match. So, Louis, this is a good place to start here, because as I'm looking at some of the Prize Picks props,
I'll go ahead and I'll pull those up for you.
Well, it tells you where this team is right now, okay, as we're starting to get some people in here on the comments as we go forward here. I mean, honestly, one of the better props I'm looking at is Jake Bailey with 2 punts inside the 20. You've got a guy in Jonnu Smith who we had a lot of high hopes for before the season. Hey, Eric. A lot of high hopes for before the season, and now he's at 1.5 receptions on Prize Picks. Odell Beckham making his first appearance of the year. They have him at 8.5 receiving yards. Is Mostert active officially?
I believe that he will be. There was reports that saying he would be playing for the New England Patriots game, so take that for what it's worth. Okay. I don't know if, again, right now the offense is so utterly inept that it's hard to imagine anybody doing really much of anything. What I really want to know, just out of just sheer morbid curiosity,
Huntley?
They actually took him off. I was looking for Braxton Berrios because last week they had him literally at 1 yard of reception.
With Odell back, I don't think he's going to be on the board anymore. Period.
Yeah, well, and look, he went under the number, so that that happened part of it. Eric, we don't have your video, but we do have your disembodied voice, so we'll go with that. And that pretty much speaks to the Dolphins these days. It's a bunch of disembodied voices talking about what could have been for the season. Tyler Huntley, by the way, 161.5 passing yards. This is an offense where it was customary for 200 passing yards in the first half. 161.5 passing yards. Eric, would you play that over?
I think I probably would, if for no other reason than, I know we all saw Mike McDaniel on the sidelines trying to ignore Tyreek Hill screaming behind him. For a guy that seemingly listens to his players as much as he does, I gotta think, he's gonna get the ball into the hands of his best playmakers, at least attempt to.
Okay, so what is a better play to you, Louis? That he'll complete 16 passes, which seems like a pretty low number, or I think they have the rushing yards out here somewhere here. Well, actually, they took it off. Well, or 34.5 rushing yards. Is this going to be more of a running game for him?
I mean, quite frankly, if I'm going to look at anything, I'm going to look at Jake Bailey because this is one of those things where I expect the Dolphins to be punting a lot, which means that there will be several opportunities for punts to be made inside the 20. So if you want to ask me about what's the easiest play for Miami right now, it would be the punter, which is a sad state of affairs as we know it today. Mike McDaniel needs to silence a lot of his critics if he wants to be able to prove that he's not just Adam Gase 2.0, just with a lot more of a smarmy attitude than Adam Gase did. Gase was more upfront about his arrogance. McDaniel likes to weave around traffic and pretend that he doesn't really know everything, and even though he thinks that he does. With that being said, this is another situation where Mike McDaniel, he said up front that changes need to be made on offense. And he also said in the same sentence, he doesn't know what those look like right now. That is not something that you want to hear from your offensive guru head coach.
But Louis, let me ask you this just to follow on this. Do you think there's any deception or him just holding things back when he says that? I mean, he's not going to tell us, right? Flat out.
I really don't think
he has us.
I really don't think he has any other plan. I think that he felt that, and again, this is a stubbornness issue, and this is something that would have to be weeded out of him with time. And unfortunately, time is something that Dolphins fans don't have in abundance to spare. They don't particularly care to have patience. They don't have the kind of love for McDaniel that they did literally less than a few weeks ago, when they felt like, well, it really doesn't matter what happens this season. We're going to ride with McDaniel because he's been the best head coach we've had in the past 10 years. That love is gone. As soon as things go sour, Dolphins fans do not care anymore. You deserve to be fired, regardless of what you've done in the past, regardless of how things looked literally one season ago. Doesn't matter. You suck now. You need to leave. There is zero tolerance left in the Dolphins fan base. So McDaniel, I don't know what he can do to change it at this point. I really don't, because I feel like this is the bed he's made and now he has to lay in it. He decided that offensive line is not important. He decided that you can just throw in whatever quarterback you want and it'll somehow work. It has not proven to be the case. This is his stubbornness coming back to bite him. And the only thing truly, I feel like, that would be able to save the season is Tua coming back. He's the linchpin for the whole offense. And even if he does, and even I'm not even going to say if, when he comes back, because he will come back. When he comes back, what is Tua going to come to? Is it going to be an even worse offensive line than when he left? That's what it feels like to me, because that's the problem. You went ahead and you banked on Robert Jones and Liam Eichenberg just inexplicably developing into something that they haven't been ever. So this is where Mike McDaniel, he will be back for 2025, regardless of what anybody wants or not. And as for Chris Grier, we'll see with him. But I would hope that this season finally acts as a referendum on the whole Miami Dolphins roster and teaches Mike McDaniel, you know what? Maybe I actually do need to invest in some legitimately good talent in the interior. I hope that that's taken away.
And I'm with you on that. I mean, obviously, look, we're in agreement. This is McDaniel's going to be back next year. I don't think there's any question about that. I think the bigger question is whether Grier is back next year. We've talked about that on some of these shows. I guess the point here is, as they're going into a situation against a really bad team after they faced a bad team last week and were completely anemic. This was the soft part of the schedule. This was part of the schedule they're supposed to get through comfortably. Had some wins for later in the season. I mean, Eric, is this? I don't think it's a referendum on McDaniel in terms of his job status, and nothing's going to change there. But I mean, do you think that if they lose this game, it's guaranteed that Tua comes back this season, because there may, like Lewis said, there may be nothing to come back to, including like no chance of actual playoff positioning. And additionally, do you think that this game serves as any kind of a referendum on Grier in any way?
It's tough to say that the game is really a referendum on Grier. Because I do think, looking at the rosters right now, and this is why I think that it might be more about McDaniel, at least for today's game, than it is for Grier. The Dolphins still, regardless of the offensive line, regardless of the quarterback, the Dolphins have a more talented roster than this Patriots team right now.
I agree.
If you can't figure it out to beat this Patriots team, again, he's not getting fired, but I think you'd be right to kind of look at McDaniel maybe a little bit differently, than before this season, and people have already started to do that. Go ahead.
Sorry. No, go.
Yeah,
I didn't mean to cut you off.
The thing with Tua is really going to be intriguing to me, because if there is a situation in which the Dolphins are 1-5, for example, and he's set to come back versus the Cardinals, I could see that going really ugly really quickly. Because if the team is 1-5, they're not incentivized to want him to come back, even if they want him to be the quarterback long term.
Right.
But he, as a player who's had this injury history, is very incentivized to come back to show that he can still be the same guy, to show that he can keep himself healthy over that long term. And so I think that can create a lot of friction there between the organization and Tua, if things do go that way.
Well, Eric, you're right in the sense that ultimately there becomes competing aims here, right? Like, look, if we're talking about money, then the best case scenario for Tua was honestly to be ruled, not in condition to play, because then he gets all his money. So if that's not going to happen, then it shifts and it does become more about, what the organization wants in terms of draft positioning this year, in terms of anything else along those lines, on whether or not you bring Tua back into a hopeless situation, and for what? I mean, I guess, Lewis, how bad does the record have to be, in your view, for the Dolphins to say, even if he's healthy, we're not going to push this. We're just going to keep waiting. Is there any number? 1-7, 1-8?
There is no record. There is no
Okay.
record that will have the Dolphins admit surrender because, again, this is a team that refuses to admit when they made a mistake. Excuse me. That's the problem with the stubbornness is that you don't acknowledge that, you know what, maybe we made the wrong call. Right now in Minnesota, in London, Andrew Van Ginkel is having an MVP defensive player of the year type of season. He has another pick six off of Aaron Rodgers now. And Miami had a chance to re-sign him, and he wouldn't have cost an arm and a leg. Not really. He would have cost something, but he wouldn't have been the most expensive player ever. Instead, we let him walk to Minnesota, drafted Chop Robinson, and I'm not calling Chop a bust or by any stretch of the imagination. He's being used as a run blocker. He's used as a run defender for some reason. I don't understand that mentality of it. Chop Robinson is a pass rusher. I don't know why they're not using him as a pass rusher. So that's a question for the coaches to answer. But as far as the Andrew Van Ginkel situation, another mistake that the Dolphins made in the offseason, they let a very talented player, one we know for a fact plays really well, and he could have been one of the top edge players on the roster in place of Chop Robinson, which would have opened the door for somebody like a Graham Barton to be drafted by Miami. But again, the situation was they didn't want to pay the talent that they already had, that they knew was proven and could get the job done. And they were instead going to bank on other players developing instead of keeping what you already knew you had. Right. And that in and of itself, I feel like, is the greatest detriment of this general manager and head coach combo. They keep drafting these players. They expect them to play well right off the bat. Again, we're trusting in Butch Barry. I don't care how good Butch is as an offensive line coach. You need talent. Ian Eichenberg isn't it. They won't admit that he was a mistake. Robert Jones, not bad, but he's not good enough. You need good, even great players. All the best teams have offensive lines that will hold like a wall. And it takes a while to knock down that wall every single play. If it goes down in 2 seconds, which it does, and I know that we talked about what is the offensive line being asked to do versus what they are actually capable of doing. That's not the point. If you ask them to hold the line for 2 seconds and they do it, then yeah, that's great. They did what you asked. But what happens in those instances where after 2 seconds, something went wrong? The line is already collapsed. The ball's not gone, which means that Tua has to make magic happen, or he has to YOLO it, and he has to pray that something horrible doesn't happen. That's not an effective strategy. You need to be able to have players who can do more than what is being asked of them on any given play. And that's the issue that we're having here. There's no room for error, and there's a lot of error when Tua's not around.
Well, no doubt. And this is the one game you look on the schedule and you're like, this is a game, Eric, that they should. I mean, Jacoby Brissett's on the other side. I mean, they've had Jacoby.
We said this about Monday, though. We said this about Monday night.
I know. And they weren't close. I mean, that game was not close. There was never a feeling that the Dolphins were going to score enough points to stay in that thing. So no, you're correct. But I'm looking at this Patriot roster, and it's like all cast-offs from somewhere else. Like they're in complete transition right now. I mean, and the Dolphins handled the Patriots when Belichick was there. I'm not sure this Patriots roster. I think it's worse than it was last year. So I guess let's start today. What do they do to win this game?
That's so tough because I think it goes back to the adjustments to the offense that Mike McDaniel has to make. And I think Mike McDaniel knows what needs to be done. I don't think he's a dumb guy. I think he knows what needs to be done. I think the problem is he looks at what needs to be done and he realizes he doesn't have the personnel to do it. What needs to be done is they need to lean into the run game, and they don't have the offensive line that's going to just shred those lighter boxes and get that consistent push. I think you have to kind of lean into those in-breaking routes, get back to that timing offense a little bit, even though it is Tyler Huntley. The announcers on Monday night were talking about it pretty much all game. that they just weren't going to those, those bread and butter plays for the Dolphins. They need to lean back into what has worked for them in the past, even with Tua, and just kind of hope that Huntley can execute it.
I'm gonna go ahead and I'm gonna say
Lewis.
something. I'm gonna say something crazy now. Are you ready for this?
I mean, it wouldn't be the first time, but go ahead. We'll take it.
Miami does have the personnel if they really want to run the football. You know what that personnel looks like? It looks like Patrick Paul at left tackle and Lester Cotton at left guard. Okay. You have your two biggest, strongest, fattest dudes, and you just say, go shove somebody in the face and go. That's all you got to do. That's their job. Lester Cotton cannot pass block to save his life, but he can move people. Patrick Paul's whole MO is he can move people. So tell your big fat guys, the biggest ones you can find, to go shove people and run the ball up the middle. That's it. That's the plan. Just be bigger than the other guy. That's the only plan that can work at this point. Hey, even if you have to make it so that Tyler Huntley has to do designed runs up the middle, just that's football at its most basic, boring form. Just be bigger than the other dude in front of you and push. That's it.
Well, that's. I mean, look, if they're going to win this game, it may end up being a 13-10 game. So, I mean, let's close on this. We got comments from Indate, all the Ward talking Dolphins fandom and what gets lost. The Canes O-line. I don't even know if that unit gave pressure on the final two drives. That was pretty masterful in terms of the protection at the end of that game. All right, so here's where we're at with it. I mean, honestly, I see like a 13-10 game today. Is that where everybody else is? Hello, Coach. We'll let you get into pick here. I got to run in a second, but like. What kind of game do you see playing out today?
Oh boy, I don't know if it's bold because both of these offenses are terrible. I don't think we see a touchdown today. I think it's only field goals. That's where I'm going. I think it's that bad.
So what you're saying is pick the over on Jason Sanders.
Absolutely, 100%.
I could see that too. Absolutely, I could see that. Eric, give us some hope for today. I have to apply in a second. If you guys want to continue the conversation, you can. Give us some hope for today.
Okay, so the hope for today is as follows. Your defense is healthier than it's been in the last couple of weeks. The offense on the other side is led by Jacoby Brissett, and they just benched Ramondre Stevenson because he can't keep his hands on the football. You need to go out there against these really bad Patriots receivers because they don't have anybody that can really get separation. Pin your ears back, get after Brissett, get a few strip sacks, couple defensive scores, hopefully. And then on offense, just take care of the football, own the time of possession. That's the hope today.
All right. I like the Dolphins 13-10 today. I started with that. Coach Smith, Eric Smith, give us a prescription today for them to sort of stop the bleeding.
I mean, I would say it's been the same thing we've been talking about for a couple of weeks now. I think you got to simplify the game plan. Hopefully Huntley is capable of handling more this week than he was last week, just being in the system longer. Hopefully we're going to see still less of those motions in the pre-snap movement, because the idea of those is to, create leverage, create, things the quarterback can see. I don't think that Huntley's at the point that he's able to use that effectively in this offense, certainly not to the level that Tua is doing. So I think that we still need to see this offense continue to be simplified. I would like to see Huntley try to use his legs more in this game than he did last time, and just try to stay ahead of the chains and win a low-scoring game today.
Lewis, take us home here. What happens?
I'll say just I'm with Eric. I don't expect to see any touchdowns. I just see field goals. That's all I see happening here. And as far as what the actual score will be, I have Miami with 6 points. New England will get to.
This is a snowplow game? We're reprising the snowplow game here.
This is the ultimate offensive ineptitude game. This is just nobody knows how to do anything. Miami's defense is too good to let Jacoby Brissett score a bunch of points on him. And Miami's offense is too terrible and too resistant to change for anything to happen. I appreciate Tyler Huntley for taking on the challenge, but unless Mike McDaniel has completely reworked his offense specifically for what he does best, which I don't think he has, then there's no shot. I appreciate that Odell Beckham Jr. is going to be coming in here to try and get his incentives, because at this point, that's all he's playing for. Is like he's got to get his money somehow. So, but I got news for him. You ain't getting it with Tyler Huntley. I mean, I'll give credit for one thing. Tyler Huntley threw Odell Beckham Jr. his first touchdown catch when he was with the Ravens. So there you go. There's something. Maybe there's some chemistry between Huntley and OBJ. So maybe
he's at 8.5 on. He's at 8.5 on Prize Picks. We'll see how that works. All right, we'll have the crew back after the game. Thanks, Coach, for dropping in. I know it's my fault for not more communicating the time. Thanks to Lewis. Thanks to Eric. I mean, watch the game, I guess. I mean, it's kind of important. If they win today, and then we're going to say, okay, you get Tua back in 2 weeks. They lose today. I mean, pretty much just that's it. So we're done for close up shop.
Watch the game for
Prize Picks, except for Prize Picks. Prize Picks, use the code 5 FIVE. We'll see you after the game.